The Timeshift.
Well, that's the end of that then. What did you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of a future video. Be sure to like, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wanted to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. Now on to the review. And so ends the Flux storyline. Sure, there are many elements within it that have just been left dangling in the breeze, plot threads that I really hope are resolved at a future point, but here and now our ride has come to a stop and now it's time for us to get off this ride and onto the station. Again, I really hope that some of these elements actually are explored in later specials, because if they're not, well, we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. So we'll start off with the headline positives, the things that I generally liked about this week's episode before we go into some of the deeper details and the things I didn't like about this week's episode, of which there are more than a few. I have to say here and now that I do appreciate the fact that this week's episode wasn't a total cluster fruitcake, as I worried it would be. I mean, it didn't fall over itself by being too ambitious, nor to introduce anything that I didn't like. I mean, as a whole entity, it was fun for what it was, and at the end of the day, from a purely technical standpoint, Chris Chibnall was able to stick the landing. It wasn't totally satisfactory. There's many elements of it that I frankly rather do not like, and some elements I'm rather ambivalent towards, but hell, if I was to give it some kind of grading, some kind of ranking, I'd give it a C. It's totally bang average, but then, as are so many of Chris Chibnall season's finales, I have to say. I have to say that it was neat to see all these different plot threads finally converging into one singular nexus point. Nothing that was introduced prior that wasn't already resolved, was just left there. It was all brought forward to actually be used and explored, and it was nice to see, I have to say. Again, some elements were really not utilised quite as much, but it was good to just watch it, to see all these different characters coming together to work together to save the day. It was good. It felt earned far more than some other season finales, but that's for a whole of discussion for a whole other time. Jodie Whittaker was on top form as the Doctor. This is probably one of her strongest performances that we've seen of her in her entire run, though to be honest with you, it really doesn't help my comparisons between her and Peter Davison, as the way that their Doctors have ultimately turned out from the performative side of things, they just feel rather similar, but that itself is a discussion for a whole other time. That moment that we got between Yaz and the Doctor towards the end of the episode was just brilliant. I honestly think it's one of my favourite moments in the Chris Chibnall era. It was just so brilliantly written and performed that at the end of the day, it just kind of feels a little bit bittersweet to me. Not because we know that Jodie Whittaker's time as the Doctor is coming to an end, and so we're not going to get moments like that again. It's just, I really wish that we had more moments like this during the run of Jodie Whittaker being the Doctor, because there just really hasn't. Yaz has still been a criminally underused entity to a level that is almost mind-boggling in a way. Still, all the performances from all our core cast members were fantastic. Everybody brought their A game, which is as is to be expected. They're all talented actors, and I think that they all nailed the job before them. I have to say that I really did like the way the Sontarans were portrayed. Once again, they had this nice balance of being both scary and funny. I liked the chocolate moment, as goofy as it was. I loved it. I have to say that Chris Chibnall is probably the best writer when it comes to Sontarans in the modern run of Doctor Who, which kind of makes the fact that he's now leaving kind of sad. I mean, I really wouldn't be against the idea of him coming back to do a few more Sontaran episodes, because they themselves, the adventures themselves, when you get away from the Flux and the Timeless Child crap, are really fantastic, and I really wish we could see more of them, but sadly we're never probably going to see him ever again. I really liked the set design for the world that existed within the Passenger. It looked truly fantastic, and I really wish that we would see more of it within the core story of Doctor Who. It reminded me a lot of Class and the episode The Metaphysical Engine and what Miss Quill did. One of the best aspects of the episode, and how the entire run of Class, was the alien worlds that we saw within that episode. They had just a great alien quality to them. And it's something I really do wish that we saw more of within the modern run of Doctor Who. We get far too many council estates, far too many green fields, far too many shots of London or Liverpool and not enough of alien worlds. We get too many corridors, too much grey, when there's so much colour that we could be seeing, which is just the way to things, it sadly seems. And I have to say that I did like the multi-Doctor stuff. Jodie Whittaker played off herself really fantastically, and it just gave us another opportunity to see what she can do with the role, and I hope that she gets more opportunities to do stuff as creative and as fun with that with her remaining 3 episodes that she has. On balance, I have to say that I did enjoy the episode. It is not my favourite season finale ever. It's not my favourite episode of this season. But on balance, I have to say that I enjoyed it far more than I hated it. It had far more things I just enjoyed, even just on a passive sense, than really things that made my blood boil. As I said earlier, as far as episodes go, this gets a C. It is bang average. It does everything that it needs to. There's nothing wrong with being average, because at the end of the day, I'd rather have an average episode of Doctor Who than a terrible one, because especially bearing in mind just how terrible the terrible episodes can be. Though with all that said, I really do feel that there should have been more to this. That this should have been a lot better for what it was. This is the final part in a 6-part storyline, and beyond anything else, it needed a bigger send-off than this. And I can only feel that a lot of this is just down to the sheer mechanics having to deal with all the flux stuff. Most of the exposition stuff more so than the actual timey-wimey saving the day stuff. Because at the end of the day, it felt as though we were just moving so much expositional furniture that it didn't really leave us much room to just tell a fantastic story. And all the stuff disconnected from the flux stuff was just great. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed them going from location to location and teaming up, and all the stuff with them, like going to the corner shop and kidnapping the Sontaran. That stuff was great, and I really wish that we saw more of it. Though again, it kind of is a problem with us having to do with the flux stuff, in addition to the timeless child stuff, as both of these plot elements are just these massive, multi-pronged, multi-limbed things that are constantly fighting for screen time against one another, and in the end, they just kind of take oxygen away from one another and make the other one just less good. Because of the timeless child stuff, our big threat, this big horrible flux thing, gets solved practically with a little bit of techno-babble, a few magic words, and a little bit of Deus Ex Machina thrown in at the end. And because of the flux stuff, didn't really get much of a development of the timeless child stuff, and it just wasn't touched upon in any great detail. This leaves both of the elements not really feeling fully as developed as they really should be for this point in the season. Sure, we'll probably see a little bit more timeless child stuff in the next few episodes, whenever they drop, but for the here and now, it kind of feels like a lot of stuff is just dangling in the air, with elements of this entire episode and this storyline just feeling like they've been dropped and not really utilised at all. The worst examples of this being with Vinder Bell and the Grand Serpent. You know, despite him being built up as this great deal, this horrific threat, this big nasty scary thing that the Doctor's going to have to contend with, they were just kind of there. The Grand Serpent was just kind of there. They weren't Rassilon or anyone like that, or at least we don't know that they're Rassilon. They're not the Master. They're just a guy with a spooky costume and danger noodle powers, and that's kind of it. I mean, I don't understand why the big threat with him really existed. He had this real big desire to destroy UNIT, but for what ends, I really don't know. Oh sure, we get this idea, the Doctor speculates that maybe they're doing this so they can establish a new world for them to rule over, but why? The why is missing, and once that why remains missing, I'm just kind of here like, okay, so here he is, and there he goes. Just plonked on a rock in the middle of space. Either so that he can be used again towards the end of Critch Chibnall's first specials, or just as royalty bait for Big Finish to use him. I really don't know what the deal is with him. I hope we get an idea as to who he really is by the time all this Chibnall stuff wraps up. Otherwise, yeah, it's just going to feel like wasted time. You know, a spooky costume and a spooky powers don't really make an interesting villain to me. And in the end, it just feels like so many of these interesting ideas conceptually, when it comes to the Chris Chibnall era, they're just kind of there. Same with Tim Shaw. Spooky, scary. At the end of the day, didn't really do much. You know, it's really is a shame. And of course, in the end, Bell and Vinder turned out to be just normal people. And I really don't know how to feel about all of that. I mean, I did have that theory previously that they would turn out to be the Doctor's real parents, and due to timey-wimey space, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, you know, they'd get separated and the Doctor would end up back on Gallifrey and the whole loop would start over or something along those lines, but in the end they weren't. They were just two normal people. I mean, hell, the whole thing of them being the Doctor, as terrible as that would have at least been something. But here they are just there. Love's young dream, not really being seemingly at this moment important at all. Which makes the whole bit from that Angels episode a few episodes back, that ending that got ruined just so we could have that last little pre-credits bit with Vinda wandering about the quarry, just feeling all the more painful. I hope they're being saved for a future episode, because here and now it just feels kind of... Ugh. I really don't like the fact that so much stuff is just being left in the air. Or at least I hope it is, because if it isn't, then it's just really disappointing how a lot of this stuff has turned out. I really did not like the bit in the episode where Dan's girlfriend was being bitchy at him for being late. I mean, he could have at least said, oh yeah, I was kidnapped by an alien dog man, sorry about that, because it just feels really rather weak. I mean, there needed to be a greater emotional reason for her to respond to him like that. Like, him being late should have been a bigger, more impactful thing for her, and we should have learnt what that thing was, so at least we can go, alright, I get it, she has some kind of unresolved trauma or something about people being late, but we didn't get that. She just said, oh, you were late, and you might be late again, and I'm just there thinking to myself, this is the biggest load of nonsense, the absolute worst plot contrivance to get him to keep being a companion for a few more episodes, a contrivance that really didn't need to be there. There could have been any other reason to continue for him to be a companion without doing that. It just doesn't work. And of course, Diana, or whatever her name is, how she knew all this stuff about this alien prisoner thing, it just... I just don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, I'm sure the character's far smarter than we give her credit for, but we're talking about a level of understanding that just feels rather out there without it really being justified. So unless it turns out she's secretly a Time Lord or something like that, yeah, it feels like a major stretch. And another thing that I really don't like, and this is something that a lot of people have been picking up, it's the fact of that, well, what's happened to the rest of the universe then? Because as far as we're aware, Earth is the last habitable planet left in the universe after all this flux stuff, so what's happened with everything else? What's happened to all these other alien species? What's going on here? I mean, I know a lot of Doctor Who finales are kind of consequence-free as far as some of the big stuff that's introduced to them, but this isn't something you can easily ignore, the fact that most life in the universe has been wiped out apart from a few little pockets here and there. You know, unless this, again, is something that's going to be resolved towards the end of the Doctor's run, I really don't understand that. I mean, maybe there's going to be a moment where the Doctor gives up all her timeless child energy to heal the universe or something. Maybe. I mean, if not, then... well, we can expect a lot more adventures on Earth in the not-too-distant future. Good gravy. Oh, no, and speaking of laboured things that really shouldn't have been there, the whole setup for the Master returning towards the end of the episode. Holy cow! Yeah, we get it. The Master of your fate or whatever. We know who that's going to be. The fact that the Master and their Time Lord Cybermen didn't show up is kind of conspicuous by their absence. So we know they're probably going to end up making an appearance in the not-too-distant future. Probably not within the New Year's special, but probably in the next couple at some point or another. Possibly as the big final thing the Doctor has to deal with in her final adventure here. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As a whole entity, yeah, I enjoyed quite a lot about this week's episode, but boy oh boy, there's just some really unimpressive moments within it that just kind of sour the mood a little bit. Now it's time for Comment Corner! Our first comment comes from X1, who says, I'm staying open-minded about everything. I'm interested seeing where all this is going, even if it feels like it's all in flux. No pun intended, of course. This was a comment reflecting upon how they were looking forward to this week's episode. It will be interesting to see what they think about it this time around, but you know what? At the time, I was myself still cautiously optimistic that we're going to get a decent ending, and, well, it's an ending, and it wasn't terrible, and on balance, I did enjoy the episode, even if at the end of the day, it really wasn't as big and as spectacular and epic as I really hoped it would be. Still, all the same, thanks for your comment. Our next comment comes from Kalizenda, who says, Tecteun gives no reason for destroying the Doctor's universe other than we all need to clean up after ourselves, as if that's a reason to destroy a universe. Doesn't make sense or any logic. Why not just leave it and the Doctor would never find out? All this seems counterproductive for her to escape. And Tecteun released the swarm. Is she a complete idiot? That went poorly for her. And yet, upon reflection, it just kind of feels like Tecteun is far less intelligent for a character who's possibly been around for eons. As I said in my reply to them, it felt at the time like the reason, the implication why she was doing this is because, like a gardener, she's just pruning and altering her little garden, that being the universe, as much as she feels to get her perfect vision of it. She is part of Division, or at least the founding member of it, and it's their job to go in through time and take out the elements from it which are problematic, and from that point of view it kind of makes sense. But the issue is that that's something that is just implied, it's not explicitly said, so it's mostly headcanon stuff coming from, which I really don't like. With a character that's just that important, connected to a group that is that important, who has a big plan to destroy the universe, one would have hoped that beyond anything else we would have got a little bit more of an understanding as to their motivations for doing all of this, which we didn't get. I was hoping that we'd end up seeing her again. Sure, we wouldn't have been with her still being alive, but we would have at least seen her within the whole Fob Watch thing, which ultimately itself turned out to be yet another Chris Chibnall cock tease. I'm not a fan of the Timeless Child stuff, as I've said many times in the past. But goodness sake, if you're gonna tease us, show us, deal with that stuff. Because if nothing else, it would have made this whole journey feel a little bit more worth it. And if nothing else, it would maybe have given us an opportunity for Tecteun's plan to at least been a little bit more explained. Like the way she talks about the Doctor in that moment in last week's episode, it's almost like she's a virus. She's this uncontrollable element that's destroying the universe, inadvertently. By her saving people, she's destroying the grand plan and causing more problems than she really intends to. And with that kind of a motivation, yeah, you'd expect there to be a reason. You'd expect that to be the reason why they're doing that. But if that's the case, why destroy the whole universe and not go after the Doctor? I'm sure that here and now, and I have to stop myself here and now, I could honestly be talking about this for the rest of the night, why a lot of her plan just doesn't make sense. Where like so much, it just feels like a lot of the grander ideas for this whole storyline have just been condensed a little bit. Maybe had this episode, or rather the last week's episode, got a little more time to grow and develop, had we hadn't had so many episodes where it's several different locations at different points in time, with us constantly flicking focus from one to the other, we would have understood it a little bit more. Maybe, I really don't know at this point. We have another 3 episodes left of the Chibnall era, and I still feel that there's a lot of stuff that we have yet to get fully discussed. And I feel that maybe Tecteun's plan might be discussed then, but I'm not honestly holding out hope. And I honestly feel that the whole Timeless Child stuff is still up in the air and probably will be touched upon at least one more time before all this wraps up. But still, what did you think, dear listener, about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of a future video. Next week, I will be doing my review of last year's Christmas, or rather New Year special. I had intended to open the reviews for this year with that one, so let me know what you thought about the last year's New Year special, or rather technically this year's New Year special. Yeah, you know, the whole timeline of all the events doesn't really work out. It was the one where John Barrowman came back for what will probably be his last appearance in Doctor Who, but you know what, that's not a discussion for now. What did you think about that episode? What do you think about this episode? And what did you think about the Flux storyline as a whole? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'll read your comments out next week if we get time to. Thank you all so very much, and goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!